Thank you for joining the Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. I'm Rosalind Martin, your host, a voice actor and mom of a young adult with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. This podcast is dedicated to enlightening, nourishing, and uplifting Black parents of adult children with ASD. Managing the daily responsibilities that come with the ASD diagnosis are challenging enough on their own. Layer on issues of racial discrimination, systemic injustices in the legal system, healthcare disparities, and more, and the journey becomes even more daunting. Too often, we as Black parents of adults with ASD feel overlooked and adrift in life's complexities. We either don't have the same supports and networks we had when our children were younger, or we never had them at all. We crave moments of recognition where we can feel acknowledged, heard, and truly understood. The Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast serves as a sanctuary of connection, community, and camaraderie where no explanations are necessary. Why? Because we all just get it. During our time together, I'll share insights into ASD, engage experts on various topics, and offer moments of solace and laughter to hopefully help soothe your spirits. Join me so we can navigate this journey together. Welcome to the Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. I'm your host, Rosalind Martin. My guest during this episode will be Theresa Grant, founder and CEO of TG Financial Coaching. If you feel like your finances are stressing you out and your budget needs some work, you'll want to join me for this episode of Reviving Your Finances, as Theresa and I will be discussing budgeting strategies to help you potentially get your finances back on track. As most of us Black parents of adult children with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, well know, the costs associated with caring for our adult children can be overwhelming and stress-inducing. For example, take healthcare costs. These can include direct and indirect costs for our adult children and, many times, even as parents, our own health. For instance, we may pay out of pocket for services like physical therapy and speech therapy. Even if our adult child is eligible for Medicaid or has private insurance, let's say you have insurance through the marketplace for yourself. And depending on your plan, sometimes it's subpar, as it barely covers the cost of treatments you may need, especially dental. And speaking of dental, in case you didn't know, the dental coverage through Social Security Administration, or SSI, the benefits are a joke. No, wait. I'm sorry, it's worse. It's non-existent. As indicated under the general exclusions from coverage, and this is on the Social Security Administration site, items and services in connection with the care, treatment, filling, removal, or replacement of teeth or structures directly supporting the teeth are not covered. And no need to adjust your audio because, yes, you heard me correctly. Individuals have to pay out of pocket or find some other means to cover the cost of their own cleanings, x-rays, etc. And if anyone has had any dental work done lately, then I'm sure we can all agree how expensive a visit to the dentist can be. But I digress. Other mounting costs can include prescriptions, surprise medical bills, and long-term care insurance. Other costs that can be associated with caring for our adult children that can be overwhelming and stress-inducing include being faced with a loss of income. One parent may sacrifice their career to care for their adult child, which can result in a loss of income for the family, or perhaps an unexpected layoff happened. Then there's retirement savings. Sometimes we as parents have to use money that could have gone towards retirement savings to pay for healthcare costs. Maybe some of us had to dip into our retirement savings just to survive. Oh yeah, let's not forget the cost of keeping our adult children involved in their social and community activities. Oftentimes, these cost money too. Whatever the situation, it can leave us with little to no funds in our budget that can be allocated for an emergency savings. What's more is that according to Autism Speaks, the lifetime cost of supporting one person with autism can range from $1.4 to $2.4 million. Of course, those numbers can increase if you have more than one child on the spectrum, obviously. Based on data from TIAA Bank in 2023, asked about an emergency fund that could cover the household's living expenses in the event of a financial emergency, such as a job loss, Americans reveal varying levels of preparedness. Overall, 6 in 10, that's about 58%, have a rainy day fund. Yet this figure fluctuates considerably across key demographics. On race ethnicity, the presence of an emergency fund ranges from a low of 40% among Black Americans to a high of 73% among Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. With all of that to consider, do you need to rebuild your emergency savings account? Have you wondered if self-care should even be part of your budget? Is your budget on life support? Need a simple budget refresh? I'm Rosalind Martin, your host of the Black Youth Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. Joining me is financial coach Theresa Grant of TG Financial Coaching, who talks budgeting strategies to help you get your finances back on track. Theresa, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me here on the Black Youth Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. Please tell listeners, Theresa, about what it is that you do best.
Hello, Rosalind and everyone out there. As she mentioned, I'm Theresa Grant. I'm founder and CEO of TG Financial Coaching. And I just want to first say thank you, Rosalind, for giving me this opportunity to talk about one of the vital things that everyone needs to hear about financial information, empowerment, literacy. And I'm here today to talk to you about one of the things that you work so hard for every single day, your money. Because no matter who you are, where you are in life, money management matters.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining me here on the Black Youth Society Voices Across the Spectrum, Theresa. So, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, the lifetime cost of caring for an individual with autism ranges from about $1.4 to $2.4 million, according to Autism Speaks. And if those numbers hold true, they should compel a lot of people to get those emergency savings in order, right? And in addition to that, I think I've hit on a few things that could be contributing to issues with financial struggles within households of Black parents of adult children with ASD. In general, with regards to Black households and emergency funds, demographically speaking, we lag sorely behind other races. And I wish I could say that I'm startled by these numbers, but I simply cannot. Not that we can address or even begin to resolve the larger issues regarding the 40% statistic that I threw out there, but I think we can certainly discuss some ways to help our listeners get their finances back on track or begin to be thinking in terms of regrouping. Of course, acknowledging that everyone's financial situation varies. We have folks on opposite ends of the financial spectrum, as it were. The ends aren't meeting at the end of the month. They're waving at each other. And their budget is, non-existent or is on life support or some variation on the theme. Some are financially comfortable, which is fabulous, but could benefit from a budget, like an annual physical, if you will. Some listeners need some financial stress relief and would like some help with turning their finances around. So let's see if you can help by talking about how to maybe start fresh to help listeners get their budgets back on track. Can you discuss some budgeting basics, Theresa?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the first things that I like to tell people is just stop. Take a deep breath if your finances are not where you want them to be. The first thing is to just take inventory of where you are. And I'll start by basically defining what a budget is, because I think a lot of times we think of, only rich people budget. There's no need for me to budget. I don't really have any money. No, that's not the case. Again, no matter where you are in life, you want a budget. And budgeting is basically taking an account of the money that you have. You're looking at the money that you earn or the money that you receive from a gift, or maybe you even won some money. You want to look at what you have. Then you want to look at what you have to spend or what you're spending on a day-to-day basis. If you're going backwards, you want to look at what you spent. If you're currently sitting down to do a budget, you want to look at what you're spending now. If you want to be proactive about it, you want to look at what you're going to spend in the future. And you take that away from whatever you have deposited into your account. That's very important. Because a lot of people want to budget based off what their salary is. No, I want you to budget off of what is exactly deposited into your account. Think about, you can't budget money that you don't have in your hand. So again, and there are a couple of ways that you can do this. And like I said, I always tell people to just take a deep breath, because it can be very overwhelming, especially if someone who says, I hate numbers, I don't want to do this. No, it's not as difficult as it make it out to be. And, there are various things out there. You can use apps. You can use Excel spreadsheets, or just old school. Grab your sheet of paper, write down what your deposit is going to be, and then you write down what you need to pay out of that money. And that's basically budgeting in a nutshell. Now, once you've done that, you can have one of three things. You'll have what is called a zeroed out budget. That means every penny that you brought in is going out to something, whether it be giving, saving, or investing, or just spending it on bills. That's a zeroed out budget. Then you have what's called a deficit budget. That means you need more to go out than you have available. So that means you're coming up short at the end of the month or the end of the week or the end of the payday. Then you have what is called a surplus budget. As you mentioned, some people are living a little bit comfortably, so you have some monies left over once you pay your bills. And then that's where we dive into creating that emergency fund or that cushion. But until you're not going to be able to create an emergency fund until you sit down and do that budget to see if you have money left over and how much of that money you can use towards building that emergency fund. And even with the emergency fund, in order for you to accurately know what the emergency fund is, you're going to have to know what it costs for you to live on a monthly basis. And the only way you're going to know what it costs for you to live is to write it down or input it in a spreadsheet, exactly what you're making and exactly what you're spending. So, and I like the term the emergency fund because there are a lot of terms going on out there. Some people say, I don't want to say emergency fund because that means an emergency is going to happen. But for the most part, I like to define an emergency fund as having additional cash flow, money on hand for things that you need. You mentioned earlier about a potential job loss. So if you were to lose your job, you want to say, okay, with the way the market is now, how long is it taking people to find a job once they lose a job, depending on what your field is? So you may have to do some research. So say as well, on average, it's taking people 6 months to find a job in my profession. With that information, you can say, okay, I want to at least have a 6 or 7 month emergency fund. And that's basically saying, bare bones, what is it going to take for me to survive in the event I were to lose a job? So that would mean your mortgage, food, clothes, and transportation. Those are kind of like the 4 needs that I would say you want top of the list for an emergency fund. And then you would find, again, that comes from your budget. So what are you spending on those things on a monthly basis? Then if you say, okay, I need a 6 or a 7 month, you're going to multiply that by 7. That's your goal to build your emergency fund. So again, it's not very complicated, but unfortunately it can be tedious. But I've seen that after you've kind of got into the groove and you do it for 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months, it kind of becomes second nature because, again, those things like your mortgage, your car payment, food fluctuates, of course, and then clothing fluctuates. But those 4 main things, they're still going to be around the same figure on a monthly basis. So you're better able to manage it. And that's the key. That's the key, managing the money that you have. Because a lot of times we're looking at, if I were to come into a lump sum, but if you're not managing what you have, getting more is not going to solve the problem.
Right. And so for those dollars that we have left, so we've created this budget and we have, let's say we have a couple of $100 left at the end of the month, right? So do we now create a line item for emergency savings? We've got $200 left, put the $200 in for that emergency savings? Or do we put 100 in and then now can we create a line item for, let's say, dare I say, self-care? You know what I mean? And I'm treading lightly here about self-care because I'm trying to be a better proponent of self-care. I mean, and I think sometimes people take those extra dollars and they splurge on what they deem are necessities in terms of self-care. So do we have permission? Should we give ourselves permission, rather, to indulge? And maybe indulge is not the best word here, especially as we're talking about budgets here. Can we? Should we create line items for that? So we can ease our consciences, right, or know that we've done the right thing by creating this line item for emergencies, right? Mm-hmm. And then we should give ourselves permission to create these line items for self-care so that we have a well-rounded budget, maybe. Can we say that? And the reason I'm asking is because I think we as Black parents of adult children with ASD really need some self-care. And many of us, for various reasons, don't prioritize it. Because what I aim to do here is encourage parents, including myself, to engage in it and start making it a priority. But I feel like, we need to really be more intentional about it. And I think if we include that as part of our budget, then we feel less guilty. I'll admit that I struggle with this one myself because I'm always thinking, this money can go somewhere else. It feels like frivolous spending. I don't deserve it right now. Maybe later, let me catch up on this or let me do something else with these funds. But I was told by a very wise person whom I respect and admire dearly, and she knows who she is, that I need to take time to care for myself in order to enjoy the life that's ahead for me and, of course, to take care of my son. And so I want to be, again, intentional about that. So I try to create a line item, right? So no matter how big or, seemingly small that self-care thing is, I feel like I've done something to care for myself and nurture myself, right? So I'm just saying all that to say that we should give ourselves permission to do that. But I think it's getting to, making sure we've included all those things that are priority on the budget so that we get to having enough to put into an emergency fund and enough left over so that we can take care of ourselves. So what say you?
Yes, absolutely. Self-care is critical. So what I like to tell my clients is, you want to start at the top. Think about the things that are most important to you. And when I say the needs, so for me, and I'll just use myself an example, it's like I have the money that I earn. Top of my list would be giving, saving, then spending on necessities. But I want to say in between that, even before you pay the bills, include a line item for self-care. Because when you think about it, before you pay the bills, because guess what? If you're not taking care of yourself and you're not around, the bill's not going to get paid anyway. And no one is going to be available to take care of your child in the way that you would.
Right.
So
I agree.
I would even say yes. You know, and then, I mean, again, those top two are dependent on what you prioritize. And I'm just, using myself as an example. But before you even pay the bills, put a line item in there for self-care. Now, this is the catch.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
Initially, it may be very small because of the responsibilities that you have. But as you remove, say, for instance, debt is an issue. As you minimize some of that debt, then you have an opportunity to increase that self-care line item. But the thing is, I want you to be into the habit of having it in the budget. Mm-hmm. I tell people, right when I say pause and look at what you're doing, I want you to write down every single thing that you spend money on right now. If you know you go to the beauty salon every couple of weeks, that needs to be in your budget. If you get a manicure pedicure every other week or so, that needs to be in your budget. That's starting where you are. Don't say, oh, well, I do this, but I don't need to do this. We'll worry about that part later.
Right.
I want you to get it all down on paper so that you can see it, in an app, in a spreadsheet or whatever. See everything that you're spending money on right now. And one of the exercises that I like to have my clients do is go to your online banking and you can download like a full year of what you spent. Mm-hmm. You can download it to an Excel file or PDF or whatever, and then just go through it and look at what you actually been spending money on. Write all that down. It goes in your budget. Then that's how you're able to determine whether or not you broke even over the year. Did you have a deficit or did you have a surplus? Now, some people will say, well, I'm paying all my bills. How in the world could I have a deficit? The deficit comes when you're using credit cards and you're not paying the bill off every month. So you're able to continue to spend and then possibly pay the minimum. But
that's a whole other podcast episode.
Yes. So but needless to say, self-care absolutely needs to be a line item, and how large that line item is going to depend on where you are in your financial journey.
Right.
So like you said, if your financial journey, if you're on life support, then unfortunately, it may be $10 or $20 a month.
I think the idea is to just create that line item so that we don't feel deprived.
Yes.
Right. There's that sense of deprivation. Right. And of denying ourselves. Right. But I think that if we create that line item, we feel like, I think that we need to, as much as we need to create the habit of having a budget, that we create the habit of caring for ourselves in the midst of all of that. I think that we can have both. Right. That we can tame our finances and we can care for ourselves. Right. In the midst of all of that, we can do, those two things can peaceably coexist. Right. So I appreciate you saying that and telling the listeners that you're giving them permission to do that as a financial coach. Right. Because sometimes I just think we need for someone to give us permission to do that.
I think it's a necessity.
Yeah. Agreed.
Again, if you're not able to be your best self,
right,
which means, because I like to tell people, I don't want you to feel like you're just working to pay bills and there's no reward for you. You're out there doing all the work.
Right.
And part of money management and being in control and creating that budget is to make sure you include some things that are going to revive you, to help you to be your best self, so that then you can be the best parent that you can be to care for your child.
Right. Absolutely. Agreed. Can you recommend some other budgeting tools? Are there any ebooks or any recommended readings? Any other budgeting tools that you can recommend for the folks out here who need some structured, tools to sort of help them along the way?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually have a free budget tool on my website. It's TheresaGrant.com, TheresaGrant.com. When you initially log onto the site, within a few minutes, it'll pop up and you can download. It's a free budgeting tool. It's very thorough. You can just go through and every day jot down what you spend. The categories are there. It's color coded, and then it tallies everything up for you. And you'll be able to see in a nutshell, like what you're spending on even a weekly basis, a daily basis. You'll be able to see what you're spending and what you're spending it on. And it'll also highlight whether or not, again, you're zeroing out or you have a surplus or if it's a deficit. Mm-hmm. And I want to just say something about the zero out budget. Mm-hmm. The zero out budget is not bad. The only one that I would say bring some pause would be a deficit. But a surplus and a zero out budget are actually good because the zero out budget, I say that's good because if you have included everything in there that needs to happen, self-care, mortgage, if everything is in there and you zero out, and of course, if the emergency fund or the savings line item is in there as well and you zero out, that's good. That means all of your money is at work.
Oh, okay.
So your ideally is the zero out budget can be a surplus and and balance out at the same. If you include your savings as a line item, then you want the zero out budget. That means all of your money is working for you. Mm-hmm. If you haven't included savings in your budget, then you want to strive for a surplus budget so that now you can include the savings in the budget. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, say if you have $200 left over, how you're going to divvy up that $200 is going to depend. If you're trying to pay off debt, you may want to split half of it or split some of it, depending on what your debt risk is, to pay some things off early, and then the other half goes to savings. But I would venture to say, number one, before you start to tackle debt, is to have that emergency fund. Right. Because if you tackle the debt and you don't have an emergency fund and something happens with the car, that's usually one of the big things that throw people in a loop. You may have to get tires or something happens with the engine. Right. If you don't have an emergency fund, then guess what? You're going to have to circle back and start using that debt that you tried to pay off.
Good point.
So that's one of the things that I recommend. But again, everything needs to be on that budget. And so the budgeting tool, as I mentioned, I have on my website. Mm-hmm. I also personally use an app called Every Dollar. And basically it has all the line items. I usually sit down before payday or whatever. You already, for the most part, most of us getting direct deposit, you're going to know like a day or so before what's going to be deposited into your account. Right. I like to encourage people to be proactive. Mm-hmm. And that means spending the money on paper before you actually spend the money. Mm-hmm. So you can use that app, and I'll say I do not use the paid version. I use the free version, and it's Every Dollar by Dave Ramsey. There's a desktop version as well as a mobile version for your phone, if you want to use it that way. And basically it follows the zero budget principles. Mm-hmm. And you're able to go in and basically you can add information, things that you pay, and it's set up on a monthly budget basis. The other thing, there are some other apps out there, but those are the two things that I use mostly. But again, old school, get your sheet of paper, write down everything that needs to be paid. Now, typically you do a budget on a monthly basis. But what I tell people starting out, or even long term, I think it's best to do a budget based on how you're paid. Mm-hmm. So if you're paid every other week, so say for instance, what was this past week? Say it was the 15th. Say you were paid on the 15th. That was a Friday. Then, of course, your next payday is going to be the 29th. What I tell my clients to do is write down what's going to be deposited into your account on the 15th. And then you're going to look at everything that's due from the 15th to the 29th. And I include the 29th because you want to go ahead and pay that, because you don't want to wait until the 29th, because you may run the risk of incurring some type of late fee, and we don't like late fees. That's giving away money.
Right.
So if you're getting paid every other week, you can do a budget that way. Just look at what you're going to be paid on that week, and then you just look at everything that needs to be paid until the next payday. Same thing weekly. If you're paid every week, okay, if I get paid on Friday, then I look at everything that's due for the next week, go ahead and allocate it, pay it, and then the same thing, and you just keep going. Because that's a lot easier than trying to, especially starting out.
Right.
And then again, you have some people that are paid twice a month. You know, I think some government benefits, and even some military, you're paid on the 1st and the 15th. So same thing. You'll look at everything that's due from the 2nd to the 15th, and you pay that from that first deposit. And then when the second deposit is there, the couple days before, you look at, okay, everything that's due from the 15th to the 30th or the 31st. And then you budget it out that way. But again, you want to capture everything that you're spending, because you can't really hide the money. You know what I'm saying? It's
right.
Like, it's like you can say, oh, well, I'm not going to write that down. Well, it's still coming out of your checking account. So write it down.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, and as I said, once you get into the habit of doing that, and that's the other thing, like, and when you mention about the self-care, that's why I ask people, put it in your budget.
Right.
So that way, if you go get a pedicure, you don't have to say, oh, I got a pedicure, now I got to pull something from somewhere to pay my power bill.
Right.
No, it's already allocated for.
Right. And it prevents, that feeling of guilt afterwards.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. You need to be rewarded for all the hard work you're doing.
Right.
There's no way around that.
Right.
It's critical. Again, it's critical. And there are ways to do it. I know and you mentioned early on in your intro, you're like the ends are waving at each other. And I recall in a seminar I was in, this guy was like, people are saying, oh, I just can't get ends to meet. And he was like, they're never going to meet. They're ends. They stopped where they are. So they're never going to go anywhere. So they're never going to meet.
Right.
So, yeah. So, some of those sayings just kind of have people, again, stressed and uncomfortable. Take a deep breath.
Right.
Start where you are. Everyone's financial plan, your budget is going to be different. I don't care if we make the exact same money, we drive the exact same car, we live in the exact same house with the exact same interest rate. Our budgets are going to be different.
Right.
Because I may prioritize giving as a bigger line item in my budget, and you may prioritize saving and investing as a bigger line item in your budget. So your budget is as unique as your fingerprint. And none of us had the same fingerprint. So another thing I like to share with people, please don't compare yourself to someone else, because you have no idea what's going on with their budget.
Excellent point.
So again, start where you are. And you can only go forward from there.
Sage advice. Theresa Grant of TG Financial Coaching, who has been talking to us here on the Black Hughes Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Grant.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm always excited to talk about money. Again, you don't have to be rich and famous to have a budget to manage your money, because if you don't know how to manage your money and you become rich and famous, you may end up broke again. So, money management is the key. Counting those pennies and giving them a job to do the job that you want them to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere, because coming up next will be the really dumb things people say about autism, Volume 2. Rosalind Martin, your host of the Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. I'm back to share the really dumb things people say about autism, Volume 2. There's no known cure for ASD or any sort of pill to cause it to magically disappear. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, ASD is a developmental disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavioral challenges. Also, according to the CDC, behavioral interventions are often used to address the deficits in these three core domains, but there are no treatments, pharmacological or behavioral, proven to cure ASD. That said, as Black parents of adult children with ASD, many of us have been indoctrinated to the many ignorant, hateful, and just plain old really dumb things that people say about our loved ones with ASD. While there have been so many advances around the treatment and care of individuals on the spectrum, it's baffling that people could still be so uneducated about ASD. In this segment titled, Really Dumb Things That People Say About Autism, I'll share some things that people have said about ASD itself and about people who have it. Keep listening. Some of them are truly head scratchers. Number 1. Women can't have autism. Number 2. You can't be autistic, you're artistic, and you can talk to me. Number 3. One of the tutors my mom hired responded to my mom saying, "He's bad at math. I thought autistic people were good at math." Number 4. You're too autistic to understand. Number 5. You're too self-aware to have autism. See, most people with autism don't know they have it. Let's always do our part to raise autism awareness and educate others. For tips on how to raise autism awareness and promote education, please visit blackhuesociety.com. That's blackhues, Hues, society.com. And if you'd like to share some of the really dumb things you've heard people say or have come across that people have said about autism with me, please email me at rosalind@blackhuesociety.com. That's ROSLAND @blackhuesociety.com and put really dumb things about autism in the subject line. I'm Rosalind Martin, and I've been your host here on the Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast. I hope this episode was both enlightening and uplifting for you. Thanks for listening. Like what you heard? Be sure to subscribe to and download the Black Hue Society Voices Across the Spectrum podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other platforms, and get new episodes as they become available. Tell your family and friends about it too, because I've got another great episode coming up where we as Black parents who have adult children with ASD will connect once again to discuss another meaningful topic. As I wrap up, let's chill out together for just a few minutes more with some music. You see, I believe in music as therapy, as a natural high, and as a salve for the soul. Until the next episode, I wish you love, peace, and positive energy.
Say you want this energy.